The art and design of video games has evolved rapidly over the last 4 decades. One of the most interesting evolutions was the move to predominantly 3D games in the mid-90s. Most games up to that point consisted of sprites that were drawn by hand. Overnight, studios needed to learn how to render and animate 3D characters, often needing sophisticated software and hardware to do so. To start out, we will cover some basic terminology for 3D rendering. Each model is made up of many different vertices, with the connections between them making up the mesh of the model. A set of vertices connected together can be filled in to become a polygon, which makes up all the surfaces that constitute a character. Usually, these polygons are overlaid with textures to add additional detail. Next, we will go into examples of how these characters were animated. There has been relatively little academic discussion about video games from this era, so this essay will be a more in-depth examination following a smaller number of examples. The first example is a 1994 interactive demo for the 3D game engine Renderware. The demo is worth discussing because it includes its own original source code. This means that it is possible to dig into the animation system and discover how that worked. The demo has an alley containing small animated rats that scamper around. The rats have simple limbless models that animate on a single repeating loop. Looking at the source code, each frame of animation for the rat is stored in a separate file. Here's the one for the first frame. It has a list of vertex positions that make up the model. Next to it are the coordinates where the textures are laid onto it. Each of the succeeding files represents a different frame of animation, of which there are only 7. The routine that runs this animation merely loops through these vertex positions. Since these frames are the only animation data for the rats, it's not clear how they were generated. They theoretically could have been mapped out by hand, but were more likely exported from a piece of animation software, something that will be explored in the next example. An early 3D game that prioritized high-quality animation was Crash Bandicoot. Developed by Naughty Dog and released for the PlayStation in September 1996, in it the players play as the titular Crash Bandicoot as he runs, jumps, and spins through jungle-themed levels. The developers wanted Crash to behave like a 2D cartoon character reminiscent of Looney Tunes. A cel-shaded 2D intro was even animated for the game. Although it was scrapped for the final release, it embodies the irreverent spirit the game was aiming for. Making this a reality in 3D required more than the basic skeletal animation of most contemporary games. With skeletal animation, the character has a bone structure to match where the bones would be in their actual body. Using animation software, the animator can bind these bones to different sections of vertices, so that they move together when the bone is rotated. However, for what Naughty Dog was trying to achieve, there were 2 major limitations. The first is that skeletal animation by itself was too stiff for creating an exaggerated cartoon character. Facial animation in particular was difficult to do using bones alone. Naughty Dog ended up supplementing bones with vertex stretching and deformation, which let them pick specific vertices on Crash's model to expand, contract, or deform him, regardless of the model's skeletal structure. The second limitation was the processing power of the PlayStation itself. It was not fast enough to calculate the animation of these bones and deformations in real time. Naughty Dog decided instead to pre-render the animations on their development workstations at 30 frames per second, only leaving the PlayStation to render the bare vertices, just like in the rats in the Renderware demo. However, this process of outsourcing rendering meant that the game couldn't have interactive animations that varied depending on gameplay. A more modern example of some possibilities from this include bending a character's legs different amounts when walking up steps, or a climbing system that can handle having uneven surfaces without the character phasing through them. In the end, by using these techniques, Naughty Dog was able to make a surprisingly satisfying character to play for the time. These early 3D games used much of the same underlying tools and methods as the rest of the CGI industry. Though limited by the technology at the time, games like Crash Bandicoot show what was possible for dedicated teams to achieve in the early 3D era.